All right, I want to say Becca Nafir, ETM Hotep. Good morning, welcome and peace. I'm doing this quick video. This is your brother Wujao, by the way. I'm doing a quick video, and I'm not quite sure who all will be tuned in live while I'm doing this video. This is early in the morning, so I hope everyone's having a great morning and getting to a good start. But I want to do a quick video and discuss our Pyramidial Curriculum. We've done it before, and I think we've done it twice before. But you know, some people may miss it, and I just want to do a quick video and go over it for the group, because you know, a lot of times out of sight, out of mind, and so people may not be aware of the Pyramidial Curriculum that we have at all, or you know, people may have forgotten about it. So I want to go over it real quick, and it's I think it's a good idea to go over it because some of the topics that have been posted in our Facebook group, it kind of relates to that. All right, so I'm just going to dive straight in, and again, those who do happen to tune in, again, welcome, and I appreciate taking the time out to tune in. All right, so the Pyramidial Curriculum that I'm referring to is this here. And if you actually go on my Facebook page, you'll see it as my Facebook cover picture. And it's been there for quite a while, and you may have seen it before. And if you haven't seen our explanation for it, then stay tuned in. All right, so I'm going to go over this and explain it. So this is our Pyramidial Curriculum, and there's a few things that are going on here. You see a pyramid, and you see 3 ribbons that are coming from it, labeled 1, 2, and 3, etc. Well, the way that it's arranged symbolically. It correlates to the 3 seasons. We have 3 levels to our curriculum: level 1, 2, and 3. And starting at the bottom is level 1, and then we have level 2 and level 3 that you see on the far right. And within each level we have 3 stages. So you see stage 1, 2, and 3 within each of those levels. All right, so it's a total of 9 stages, but 3 levels. Now those 3 levels correspond symbolically, of course, to the 3 seasons that were known to the ancient Egyptians, or the Remage. And so those seasons start at the bottom. The first season is Akhet, which is the season of inundation, when the Nile swelled and flooded. And so that's the flooding time. Then we have the season of Peret, which is the season of emergence, which is what Peret means. And that's when the seeds were planted and the flowers grew out of the soil, etc. So the plants started to emerge. And then at the top we have the last season, 3rd season, which is Shemu. And it's probably hard to see on the screen, but that's Shemu, which is the harvest season. So if you notice how the seasons go in logical order, chronological order, where the Nile floods, it makes the area very fertile. Seeds are planted, plants are grown, everything is taken care of and cultivated, and then all of the food or plants are harvested, and then the cycle repeats itself. Okay, so now the reason why that's used is because the learning process is can be compared to the same thing. First, we have to fertilize the mind. All right, you can't plant seeds. It's just like farming. You won't be able to plant seeds in an infertile soil and expect a good crop yield. All right, you'll be lucky to get anything, all right, in infertile soil. So in the case of Kemet, we have Kemet versus Deshret, where Deshret, the word Deshret, is a word that denotes dryness, desert, you know, harsh, and infertility. And then you have the word Kemet, which is land that's accessible by water, fertility, and farmable land, basically. And so that's you may have seen people go back and forth on the meaning of Kemet and things like that. But, if you keep it simple, it's right there in front of our faces. So you have Kemet and Desheret. So with the learning process, your mind has to be cultivated. Your mind has to be prepped to receive information and to yield good crops. In this case, good information, good actions, good behavior. All right. So the inundation or the flooding is symbolic of that process. So that represents level 1. And in level 1, we have stage 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1, level 1, is the very, very beginning. And in our curriculum, the very beginning is where you learn the foundation information on the language of ancient Egypt, which is known as Rani Kemet for the spoken language, and Sesh, Medew, Netcher for what most people refer to as hieroglyphs. All right, that's stage 1. And we learn the language technically because it's not our mother tongue. We're not babies growing up into a speech community or a household that is already speaking this language and have a full community that's also speaking the language. So we have a mother tongue. In most of our cases, it'll be English. And then, there's a lot of others with different mother tongues. But regardless, Rani Kemet is not our mother tongue. And when you learn a second language and deal with language acquisition, and you acquire new languages and learn new languages, what we tend to do when we learn new languages is that we'll take our mother tongue and we'll compare. We'll base our learning process off of the language that we already know and grew up learning. So for me, for example, English is my first language. So when I learn any other language, I'm going to compare or accumulate the knowledge of another language by comparison to English. Our minds tend to do a compare and contrast with what we already know, and that's how learning works. There's the cognitive functions of the brain and our minds. We learn through accumulation and association. But that's probably for a whole nother topic as well. So the first level is to stress fertility, fertilize the mind. So stage 1, this is what we're learning, the language. And that's very important because our premise is that language is the DNA of culture. All right. And it's also the oldest witness to history. A people's culture is conveyed through the medium of its language. And so in order to become intimate with any particular culture that you're studying, you have to do it by way of its language. There's no way around that. All right. You can try, but you'll always be handicapped if you don't go through the language to become intimately knowledgeable about a particular culture. All right. So that's the premise. And so that's the beginning. That's the door. That's the doorway. That's the, opening into this endeavor, learning process. Okay, so that's stage 1. Stage 2, which is above stage 1, is Rani Kemet grammar and penmanship. So after you get the beginner's fundamentals under your belt and you wrap your mind around it and you become proficient, then you move to the next stage, which is to learn the language, the grammar of the language. The same way that we learn languages naturally. As a baby, we learn our mother language, our native language, by observation and direct contact with our parents, household, members of our household, and the community. And so we pick up language that way. That's how we acquire our first language. But in doing so, we make a lot of mistakes. I'm sure you all can remember being young, or if you have children yourself, you find yourself correcting your children, depending on their age. But usually when they're, in low elementary grades, they know how to talk. You've been speaking to them in the house and everything, but they will say some things improperly. They will have the wrong tense on words. They may put an ed past tense on a word where they shouldn't put a word. They may make a word plural when it should be singular, especially verbal agreement. Instead of saying I am, someone may say I is. Things like that. So we correct our children, and then as children we are ourselves corrected. And this goes on in pretty much all communities around the world. All right, you don't want your children growing up not being able to speak eloquently. All right, so later on in life, after a baby growing up and things, then you go to school and you actually learn explicitly instructed on the language that you speak. Even though you were already born into it and you've been speaking it in the household, when you get into elementary school at a certain grade level, you'll start to take up a language class. Here in the United States, English is taught, and English grammar and English literature, where you'll learn about different literary styles, poems, poetry, plays, and things like that. I remember, plays that we had to recite. Everyone picked a character. You had to recite different parts. I had to read Macbeth, Beowulf, all these different literature books on that side. But then you also learned grammar, English grammar, in school. Even though you've been speaking the language, all your life up until that point, you still go to school to be explicitly instructed in the grammar. All right. So this is no different. So stage 2 would be just that, learning the grammar and penmanship. You have to learn how to write it, because this writing system, I should say, is it takes a little extra effort, to say the least. It's not like the Latin orthography or the Latin script, where the letters are fairly easy to reproduce. The Sesh, Medew, Netcher are pictorial by nature. They are pictographs, and so it can be challenging for people who are not who are not very skilled at drawing. All right, so we have a penmanship at that stage. Stage 3 is a foundation in historical comparative linguistics. Okay, so this is when things get a little more meticulous. Well, all of it's pretty meticulous, but as you see, stage 1, 2, and 3, you're getting a little bit more greater detail into the amount of work that's entailed in those stages. But stage 3 is the foundation in historical comparative linguistics, and that's necessary because it opens everyone up to the fact that language itself is not created in a vacuum. Languages are each individual language is part of a family of languages that are related. They come out of a parent language, a parent speech community, a parent culture as well, and a parent population of people before migrations and splits and things happen where the speech becomes mutually unintelligible, where dialects are formed and then they further and further get distant and separate languages form, but the languages are related. And so the comparative method in historical comparative linguistics is a discipline that has all the tools necessary for us to trace out the genetic relationships between languages and how far along the timeline, or in other words, the proximity, I should say, to that relationship. Okay, and so it opens us up to see where Rodney Kemet, as the language of ancient Egypt, is part of a family of languages. And so it allows us to know and to utilize related African languages to confirm or deny different meanings of words. We can fact check the dictionaries, Egyptian dictionaries. We can fact check Egyptologists or any other scholars by actually putting in the work. So that's that necessary stage of that. All right. So that brings us to level 2. Level 2 is a level that corresponds to Peret, the season of emergence. So level 1 is a prep level. You know, you know, the flood, you know, like I said, the flood, the Nile floods, land becomes fertile and you start to cultivate the actual soil itself. And then stage 2 is when you plant and you start to see things grow. And so that's what level 2 is about. It's about everything that you've done in level 1, you'll start to see some kind of results and some growth from that. So stage 1 of level 2 is the recovery of the historical pronunciations. So now you're able to utilize what you know from level 1, all of those stages, and participate, if you choose to, or at least have the ability to skill, to help and assist in the recovery of the historical pronunciations of Rani Kemet. The reason why that's there is because Rani Kemet, they classify it as a dead language. It's not extinct, but it is dead. And so linguists, some linguists, I should say, make a distinction between dead languages and extinct languages. And it makes sense because a dead language is basically how they define a dead language versus an extinct language. Is an extinct language is no more. You know, there's no body speaking it, and the knowledge about it, the ins and outs about it is pretty much lost. Okay. A dead language is a language that is still spoken, but it's not spoken in any official capacity or national capacity by any large group of people and things like that. So, for example, the Egyptian language is considered dead language, but it is still spoken in the form of Coptic today. The Coptic Christian Church and the Coptics over there in Egypt, modern Egypt today, and elsewhere that speak Coptic. Okay, and Egyptologists consider Coptic the last stage of the Egyptian language. So people should have asked the question, well, on one hand, you say Coptic is the last stage of the Egyptian language, and it's still spoken today, but yet you're the same person that says that the language is dead. So that should have raised the eyebrows of people to ask the question. But just to clarify, a dead language is a language that can still be spoken. All right, so don't think dead means what we think it means. All right. So in saying that, the writing system itself, Sesh Netcher, did not document the vowels. So we don't know the vowels that are in between consonants. So what you're looking at are the consonants. And so our pronunciations today are all tentative. And we make this clear time and time again. Those who teach, all of the scholars that have written books, you usually find this disclaimer or this being mentioned in the introduction or the early part of any type of book on the language. They point out that the pronunciations today are tentative and it's based on consensus. Okay, so when we say words like Ankh, Hotep, and all these other words that we say usually, they're not and should never be taken to mean that this is how the ancient Egyptians or the Remich pronounce these words. All right, but also let it be known that the correct pronunciation does not prevent one from knowing its meaning. And that's the most important part. The semantics of the language is what's important. And this is what we're ascertaining and gaining knowledge of. And so the pronunciations, this is why it's in level 2 and not level 1. So anyway, it's a project underway by African scholars spearheaded by Dr. Raketi Amin. And so there's a formal, an actual project underway, but there's others who may not be a part of any particular projects that have the same interest and are probably working on some things as well. But anyway, stage 1 is all about that, of level 2. Stage 2 of level 2 is the development of speech communities. Now notice that comes after the recovery of the historical pronunciations. And also I want to note, when it comes to historical pronunciations, it will be done very meticulously and scientifically, as best as possible. But it's almost impossible to recover all of the historical sounds. And the sounds of a particular language is generally called its phonology. So remember that, phonology. And so the phonology of the language is what's being reconstructed. And so at some point there will be a consensus. People will just have to agree that on a few things. All right. So anyway, stage 2 again is the development of speech communities, because now that we've gone through the work of doing our best to recover the historical pronunciations, now we can start to speak it and to prescribe it to people. Now we can formulate prescriptive grammars and prescriptive ways of pronouncing and speaking it. We can document all of that. And so now we can start teaching people how to speak it and how to pronounce these things that we all are going to agree on. And it will grow into speech communities. And then it will be a revival of the language. Okay, so that's stage 2. And stage 3 of level 2 is recovering the realities behind figurative speech. Now, this is a very interesting stage in this process. This is the stage that a lot of people would love to get to, or love for it to be at level 1, stage 1. If you notice that a lot of people that talk about Kemet, they want to talk about it in a esoteric versus esoteric way. I don't know how many people may notice that, but a lot of people will start to talk about it, and then they'll go off into the esoteric aspect, or they'll try to, and they haven't done anything that lead them up to that. So this is what I mean, that a lot of people would love for level 2 stage 3 to be level 1 stage 1, and they skip a whole lot of things, and they want to get into the Heka. They want to talk about Heka. They want to talk about words of power. They want to talk about chakras. They want to talk about aligning the third eye. They want to talk about taking a trip to Kemet and laying inside the pyramid at night and looking at the Orion constellation and the star Sirius through one of the shafts inside the pyramids. And they want to sit on the head of the Sphinx when Cyrus rises in the horizon, and they want to feel the energy, and they want to be able to talk directly to the Netcher and come over back home to the United States fully charged, glowing. Of course I'm being there's a joke there, but still, there's some truth to that. There's a lot of people that would like to skip over a lot and talk about that, but they have not anchored themselves in the foundational information that gives them the ability for checks and balances. So stage 3 is the recovery, or recovering the realities behind figurative speech. First, at that stage, people will learn about figurative speech and how figurative speech was an ancient technology that was used, that was very, very important. Something that we do and still do today, but it's not as valuable or important to us today as it was in ancient times. It was absolutely necessary in ancient times, whereas today we use it as pastimes. We use metaphors, simile, hyperbole, allegories, symbolisms and things in hip hop, rap music, songs, all kinds of things. We do it today. But in ancient times, it was more so necessary. And the reason why is very simple, or one of the reasons why is very simple, because in ancient times, remember, before writing, everyone had to memorize everything. So any speech community, the vocabulary of an entire speech community had to be limited. You couldn't just have an endless amount of vocabulary words, because it would be very hard to memorize those things. It was hard to memorize data, hard to memorize stories, hard to memorize scientific facts, things that had to be passed down from generation to generation. So there had to be a way to effectively memorize different information, and also the meanings of different words in the language itself, and so on and so forth. So this calls for a lot of possible homonymy in the language, words that sounded alike but mean different things. There's punning. There's all kinds of different things that were used. Okay, so, and also paronymy, word almost escaped my mind. Paronymy was also used and very big in ancient times. So figurative speech is very widespread in the literature in ancient Kemet. So a lot of the different texts that we read and see and stuff, it's full of figurative language, figurative speech. It's not meant to be taken literal. Not everything is literal, and things like that. So you have to know, and because we're not born into the culture, it's a process that we have to recover those realities. All right, so that's what stage 3 is all about. And stage 3 is actually more so a must stage for an initiatory system, and it sets that up because one of the reasons why initiatory systems exist, it's really an educational system, but it provides an environment to be educated in a very controlled way. And so that way information can't be misconstrued. You don't have to listen to somebody tell you something, then you walk away with a totally wrong impression of what they're saying. So they're very good learning environments, initiatory environments, initiatory houses, going through initiations and things like that, where things are explained to you in a very accumulative way, procedural way. Okay. And the famous one that I always refer to is the way that the Dogons break up their 4 degrees or 4 levels of the word. And so make sure you look into that and you'll see an example of that. So anyway, again, stage 3 is the recovery of the realities behind figurative speech. And that's a very, very interesting stage. That's the stage, like I said, everybody wants to get to from jump. You want to talk about, the true meaning. What does Jehuti really represent? And what is everything? What's going on? So that's reserved for that stage. Okay, so moving on to level 3. Level 3 again is the harvest. So level 3 is harvesting. Level 3 is reaping what you sow. So level 3 is all about action, application, execution, utilization. So they're pretty self-explanatory. So stage 1 is application, stage 2 is utilization, and stage 3 is execution. And really all 3 of those are take place kind of simultaneously in level 3. So level 3 is actually utilizing everything that you've learned about the ancient Egyptian culture, the Kemetic culture, and seeing and using it as a living resource for what we can do today. And so obviously we don't want to live in the past, but we can use it as a bank account to withdraw when we need to all of the wisdom and apply it for today in today's situation if it's applicable. Okay, we can only use that which is applicable to what we got going on today. All right, so that's what stage 3 is all about. Stage 3 is designing frameworks and things for that process, and things like that. So that's all 3 levels and all 3 stages within those 3 levels. Okay, so I hope that's pretty clear. Like I said, we've explained this before, but I felt the need to explain it again now because I've seen some topic posts and comments in the group. The most recent thing was about the grammar. Now I've kind of bumped up some of the old posts that I've done about the grammar to kind of just put it in people's minds that we're gonna get right back. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna put our focus on that a little bit because the book will be coming out and the classes will be starting, and I'll be making those announcements in the near future. But I wanted to kind of get people used to get their minds kind of worked out get a workout on the grammar. And because I've done that, one person in particular, maybe a few others, share his thoughts about grammar not being important or being a waste of time. And really, it comes down to just personal opinion and preference, and what a person feels about grammar, something that they have not studied and may feel a way about. But to say it's a waste of time is just totally nonsense. And so I made that clear over the past 2 days or so, that grammar exists in all languages. And I even did a post about the word grammar itself and how it's used and how it's misused, actually. Grammar itself is the set of rules that governs a language. It causes a language to be consistent enough in order for it to be a tool of communication. If there was no such thing as grammar in any particular language, then there'd be no communication between groups of people, individuals within a group of people, because then everybody can say anything randomly, random word order, random meanings attached to different words. It would be totally chaotic, and it would defeat the purpose of speaking in the first place. Okay, so grammar is an innate quality within languages. Okay, that's one definition of what grammar is. Then you have another use of the word grammar when people analyze those rules that govern a language, and then they write about it or they talk about it. They call that a grammar. So if I was to study the rules of, let's say, a Chinese language, I forget the name of the Chinese language, but let's say, I go over to China and I study the rules that govern the main Chinese language, and then I document it. I write a book about it. I describe its features. I describe the phenomenon that happens, and all of this and that. And I put it into a book. That particular book would be called a grammar. It would be a grammar of Chinese specifically, but people will call that a grammar. Okay, so that's one use of the word grammar. And then another use of the word grammar is for the entire scientific field in linguistics of the study of those rules of different languages. You can study the rules that govern world languages, and that's a scientific discipline called grammar. And those people who do that are called grammarians, and those who write grammars. And then there's different kinds of grammars. You have prescriptive grammars. You have descriptive grammars. And the difference between those is a descriptive grammar is a person who will observe the rules and write about it and try their best to describe what's going on in the language. Then you have prescriptive grammars where they will prescribe and pretty much kind of dictate to you how things should be in the language. That's like the general difference between those two. So, I explained all of that. So that's like a recent topic that has come up. Because within that conversation, one of the reasons why comments were made about grammar being a waste of time is because the assumption is that Sesh Medew Netcher as a writing system or Rani Kemet as a spoken language is somehow its purpose is supposed to align the soul with the cosmos and all this, things like that. And third eye chakra vision and learning meanings through meditation and stuff like that.
This is why I'm creating an entire brand new course, an entirely new way of doing Medew Netcher. It's going to be completely centered around Medew Netcher from a visual perspective. I'm going to teach you how to project from your Ajna chakra, which is right here. And I'm going to really teach you to have a connection with sacred geometry, because you can't learn Medew Netcher if you're not talking about sacred geometry. That's all Medew Netcher is sacred geometry carved into stone and crystal.
These are things that I've heard year after year after year after year by different people. And every single time, it is always by people who have not taken time out to go through a rigorous study of the language. And it's almost like people want to microwave it. And so this is why I say that what you see on the screen, stage 3 of level 2, a lot of people would like for it to be stage 1 of level 1. They want to start there. They want to start talking about chakras, 7 chakras, opening a chakra, opening your third eye, meditation, all these kinds of things, to jump ahead without knowing anything about what was written. They do not allow the ancestors to speak because they don't take time out to learn the language. And it's I don't want to go too far off, and maybe I'll do another video about that. But anyway, this is what inspired me to want to go over this Pyramidial Curriculum again, to show that there is a structure, there are levels to this learning process. All right, we don't microwave things, and you shouldn't microwave things. All of the esoteric things that people would love to talk about and get into and stuff like that, it's in here, but it's not the first thing you're going to learn. It's not the first thing you should learn. All right. That's just not how it works. You always start. Okay, remember this. In order for a symbol to be a symbol, there has to be a reality that it symbolizes. A symbol is not the reality itself. It is only a stand-in for the reality. And so you have to start with the reality. If there's no reality, there can be no symbol. And so what a lot of people do, they want to talk about the symbol and never get acquainted with the reality. Or keep your feet on the ground, anchor yourself. So that's always the start. And so that's why this Pyramidal Curriculum is set up this way. So lastly, what I want to share is, remember I mentioned that these 3 levels correspond to the 3 seasons, but I want to give a little bonus here and share with you. A lot of people have not seen this before. Well, obviously, if you been hanging in our group and been dealing with us, the Sesh mdw-ntr, then you've definitely seen it before. But be surprised, a lot of people haven't seen this before. But anyway, this is a snapshot of a portion of the wall in the tomb of Medew. All right. Early Old Kingdom, early dynasties, tomb. And this, what you're looking at, is the personification of the seasons of the year. They're deified and they're personified and they're enthroned. So you see it, you see 3 of them sitting on the throne. And you see that they're holding in their hand a shenu. And within the shenu, they have carved in there, what do you call those? Crescent moons. And there's 4 in number in each one of them. So this here is telling you that each season had 4 months each. And then their names are above their heads. So the first one, which is on the right, the far right, is Akhet. That's the first season. The second season is Peret in the middle. Peret, you see it, you see the name above the head. And the third one is Shemu, and you see that name above the head as well. All right, in the glyphs, and I also wrote it in, spelled it out above their heads as well. So you have Akhet, Peret, and Shemu. You have 4 months in each of those seasons, 3 seasons in a year. And then under it, you have the word Nefer under the first Shenu. You have Hotep under the second one, and then Ankh for the third. Okay, so those are the enthroned, deified seasons of the year. All right. and this is good to know, so make sure you aware of it. And I'll probably post a link to the tomb where you can find more information about it. But because there's information out there, there's a lot of misinformation out there, period, about all kinds of different topics, but especially with Kemet, there's a whole lot of misinformation. And like I said, it's mainly due to people skipping the fundamentals. They want to rush through it, instead of taking the time to learn properly. But there's a lot of misinformation, and a lot of people have good intention, but nevertheless, there's a lot of misinformation, and which involves the one of the things involves the calendar, the months, the days, and things like that. People have made up a lot of different things, but here's a primary source where you can actually see the 3 seasons. You can actually see the order that they're in. Akhet comes first. Akhet is the flooding season. I know there's been some discussions about the order of the seasons, or which one represents the flooding time and things like that. But this pretty much straightens that out for everyone. So yeah, I just wanted to show that as an extra bonus. And in fact, there is an article on our website, sesh-mdw-ntr.com, that actually goes through the calendar. It's a brief article about the calendar system. Give you an introduction about the calendar system. All right. And so, all right, that's it. And so now, as usual, I'll take some time out to look at the comments on here. I've been pretty much running my mouth explaining the Pyramidal Curriculum. And I hope that was clear. But let me check. Let me scroll back up. And again, I'm going to say ETM Hotep, and I appreciate those who are hanging out with me. This is early morning, and I do these things unannounced pretty much.